Ireland could now be one of the very best paths remaining to an EU passport. You can qualify to apply for citizenship in 5 years, keep your existing citizenship, navigate the whole process in English, and access the UK visa-free. This beats Portugal, which used to be the top choice, until it doubled its citizenship timeline to 10 years in May 2026. Keep watching to find out which Irish residency route best fits your situation and discover which one gets recommended online a lot, but doesn't lead to a passport at all. Now, a lot of people researching EU second citizenship still treat Portugal as the obvious best path. And that was the right answer until May this year, but it isn't anymore because of the doubling of the timeline. Ireland was always sitting in the second position behind Portugal, and now it's moved into the lead for a pretty specific reason. There are 5 criteria that actually matter to most of the viewers of this channel, and Ireland ticks all of those boxes. First box is the timeline. 5 years of qualifying residency makes you eligible to apply for citizenship, not 10 as Portugal now has. That's the headline fact, and it's what makes Ireland one of the strongest controllable routes to an EU passport that's currently available to non-EU nationals. Secondly, Ireland allows dual citizenship without any conditions. You don't have to give up what you've already got in order to become Irish. And then there's the language issue. Now, English is one of Ireland's 2 official languages, and there's no language test for naturalization, which is almost unique in the EU. Compare that with a B2 French exam, a B1 Greek exam, or even an A2 Portuguese exam, and you can see the advantage here. Box 4 is neutrality. Ireland is not in NATO, and it hasn't fought any wars since gaining its independence in 1922. For viewers thinking about where their children might end up in 20 years, that is an important consideration. And the 5th and final box is access to the UK. Thanks to the Common Travel Area rights, Irish citizens have free movement, work and study rights in the UK. You get an EU passport that also gives you that access, and no other citizenship in the EU can achieve that because of Brexit. So before I walk through these routes, 3 quick mentions for viewers who might actually not need any of them. First off, if you have an Irish-born parent, then you're already eligible for citizenship and you can just apply for a passport directly. If you have an Irish-born grandparent, then you can claim Irish citizenship through the Foreign Births Register, and the grandparent doesn't need to have been registered or even be still alive. And if you're married to an Irish citizen for at least 3 years, and you've lived on the island of Ireland for 3 of the last 5 years, then that's another route that could be an option for you. These options are worth knowing about, but they're not something that the majority of viewers can easily choose. This video is about the 4 main residency routes that you can actually control that go beyond birth or marriage. Okay, so before I get to the routes, I just want to define 2 important things that you're going to hear me talking about a lot throughout this video. The first one is Ireland's stamp system. So when you get permission to live in Ireland as a non-EU national, that permission comes with a stamp number from 0 to 6. And the 4 that matter most for this video are stamp 1, 4, 5, and stamp 0. Now, stamp 1 is what you get on an employment permit. Stamp 4 lets you work for any employer or run your own business. Stamp 5 is Ireland's version of permanent residency or indefinite leave to remain, which is available after 8 years living there on qualifying stamps. And stamp 0 is a temporary permission for retirees and people of independent means. Now, the second concept here is what's known as reckonable residence. This is the Irish government's term for the time spent in Ireland that counts towards your eventual eligibility for Irish citizenship. Now, work stamps and long-term residency stamps count towards this, but student stamps and stamp 0 typically do not. The day your first reckonable residence stamp is issued and registered is the day your citizenship clock officially starts. And that can be, and usually is, different from the day you arrive in Ireland. So keep that in mind, it's important. With those 2 definitions in place, let's talk about the 4 residency routes in Ireland that really matter and which you can control. So first off, let's talk about earning your way into Ireland. So the Critical Skills Employment Permit is the route that a lot of my US and other non-EU viewers will end up using. It's also one of the most efficient, realistic paths to citizenship in the European Union, with no language tests and clear stamp transitions throughout the process. So here's how the structure works. You spend 2 years working for an Irish employer under the permit, and then you switch to stamp 4 and you spend 3 more years on that. And by the end of your 5th year, you're eligible to apply for citizenship. So to qualify for this permit, you need to have a job offer in place from an Irish employer in one of the occupations on the Critical Skills Occupation list. Now, this list covers most ICT roles, healthcare engineering, life sciences, and a long list of other professions. Now, your salary has to be at least €40,904 per year, and that's the case from March the 1st, 2026. That's the threshold for occupations on the list. Now, if your role isn't on the list, the salary threshold jumps up to €68,911 instead. Those figures come from the Department of Enterprise, and I'll link that page in the description. So, a few things about this permit make it the best option for skilled workers. Now, unlike the rest of the EU, Ireland does not have a labour market needs test for this particular residency permit, which means that your employer does not need to prove that they couldn't find an Irish or EU candidate first. And this is really important because this is a barrier throughout most of the rest of the EU, because getting sponsored for a work permit requires the employer to give this evidence first, which can be obviously really challenging. And on this permit, your spouse or partner also gets a permit for Stamp 1G, which means that they can also work in Ireland without applying for a separate work permit. And after 21 months on the permit, you can also apply for Stamp 4 directly, which gives you the right to work for any employer, change jobs without permission, and run your own business if you want to. And I'll come back to one important salary trap that catches out a lot of applicants. But first, there is a structural factor that a lot of viewers miss that's important to talk about. So a lot of people think that this 5-year clock begins when they arrive in Ireland, but actually it doesn't. The clock to citizenship begins on the day that your critical skills permit is issued and registered, which means that the time you spent visiting Ireland on a tourist visa or under the 90-day Schengen rule to interview for a job doesn't count towards citizenship. The day you get that residency permit is the day your clock starts. And now the salary trap. That €40,904 figure has to be in your base contract on day one. That's before bonuses, stock options, or commission, or any benefits in kind. If your offer letter shows a base salary of, say, €38,000 with a guaranteed €5,000 bonus, then the application is very likely to fail. The official guidance on that is pretty unambiguous, and you can confirm it with your employer before they file. And one more thing about this route that you ought to know. Most of the successful applicants tend to be in ICT, healthcare, engineering, or the life sciences. So if you're a software engineer with, say, 5 years of experience, a registered nurse, or a chartered engineer with the right qualifications, then it's a well-trodden path into Ireland, and the employer side will know how to file the paperwork. But if you're in a less standard role, then you should check out the critical skills occupations list directly before assuming that you qualify. This list changes from time to time, and a role that might have been eligible last year might not be this year. So critical skills works if you've got a degree and an Irish employer who's willing to sponsor you, but there's another route into Ireland, which is interesting and doesn't require either of those things. Let's take a look at that one next. So if you don't have a degree and you don't have an Irish employer to work for, then there's a second route in that doesn't need either of those things, and it's called the Startup Entrepreneur Program, or STEP for short. Ireland has been running this since 2012, and it can give you residency from day one if you can convince them that your business idea is the kind of thing they're looking for. So here's what you need on paper. First off, you need €50,000 in funding for your business, and that can come from your own savings, a business loan, angel investment, venture capital, or a grant from an Irish state agency. There's a €350 non-refundable application fee, and you need to have an innovative business proposal that fits a specific definition that I'm going to go over in more detail in a moment. You need police clearance certificates from all countries that you've lived in, and no criminal convictions in any jurisdiction. Russian and Belarusian citizens haven't been able to apply since 2023, so keep that in mind if you fall into that category. If you get approved, then you and your immediate family can get residency in Ireland for 2 years to start with, and then that's renewable for 3 more years, and the whole period will count towards your 5-year naturalization clock. But there's one area where a lot of applications die. The €50,000 is the easy part, but applications can be killed by not meeting the definition of what actually counts as a high potential startup. So the department's own guidance defines this as a business that introduces a new or innovative product or service to international markets, is involved in manufacturing or internationally traded services, can credibly create 10 jobs in Ireland and €1 million in sales within 3 years, is led by an experienced management team, headquartered and controlled in Ireland, and is less than 5 years old. So that's 6 criteria And your business has to tick all of them to have a chance of being accepted for this residency route. And the guidelines are also pretty explicit about what does not qualify. So they exclude categories like retail, personal services like hair salons or cleaning, catering, hospitality, and any businesses that are aimed only at the domestic Irish market. So if your business intends to serve Irish customers only, then it's unlikely to pass the requirements. And the guidelines also say very plainly that meeting the €50,000 of funding does not guarantee approval. The committee evaluating your application is independent. It includes representatives from Enterprise Ireland, and their job is to judge whether or not your proposal is innovative enough to qualify, and they do reject a lot of applications. They don't actually publish the exact rejection rate, but immigration lawyers who handle STEP cases consistently say that approvals are the minority. The pattern in successful applications is that the founder has serious domain expertise, the business has real export potential that is clearly outlined in the plan, the IP is defensible, and there's a credible management team behind the idea, not just one enthusiastic founder. So if you're somebody who has deep expertise in a specific field, who can build a vertical AI tool, a piece of software as a service for an international market, some fintech infrastructure, then STEP is the most direct route for you. And it will get you to stamp 4 without an employer sponsor. But I want to be honest with you about something. This video is not long enough to really do STEP justice as a route, because there's a lot of work that goes into a successful application. And I'm planning to do a dedicated STEP video with an expert who has handled this process for multiple clients. And I'm also planning a Freedom of Information request to the Department of Justice to find out the patterns in successful applications. So if that's something that might be useful to you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. So both critical skills and STEP put you on a 5-year clock. But there's one group of viewers watching this who don't need to wait at all to get residency in Ireland. Now, if you're a UK national, the next part of the video is going to be the one that matters the most for you. Now, Ireland is the easiest path to EU citizenship in the whole EU if you happen to be British. And the reason why has nothing to do with the EU itself. It's actually a bilateral agreement between the UK and Ireland called the Common Travel Area, and it's been in place for many years before the EU. Here's what the Common Travel Area gives you as a British citizen. You can move to Ireland without a visa, a work permit, an employer sponsor, or a savings threshold. You can live there, work there, study there, access public services there, and stay as long as you want, with no minimum income requirement, no application fee, no quota, and no immigration processes to navigate. You basically just step off the plane or the ferry and you're legal to stay. And I'll come to the citizenship implications in a moment, because there's one thing about how Brits qualify for an Irish passport that most viewers don't know about. But first off, the Brexit question. When Brexit happened, the Common Travel Area survived completely intact. Both governments confirmed it would remain as a bilateral agreement separate from the EU framework, and so the loss of freedom of movement to the rest of Europe did not affect the UK to Ireland link whatsoever. So if you're British, you still have that same access to Ireland. Now, the citizenship piece. As a British citizen living in Ireland, your time there still counts towards the 5-year reckonable residence requirement for Irish naturalisation. UK, EU and Swiss nationals who've held that nationality for more than 5 years can apply on the same 5-year timeline as anyone else, and they don't need to use the same reckonable residence calculator that non-EU applicants do, because their proof of residency is much more simple. The Common Travel Area is the cleanest path, but that's only if you happen to be British. There's a 4th Irish visa that gets recommended all the time on American expat forums in particular, but this is the one that I really need to warn you about. So the residency visa that gets recommended on all these forums is called Stamp 0, and it's for people with passive income or retirement savings. And it's the one I teased at the start of this video, and it's the one that has the potential to trap people in a residency setup that doesn't lead anywhere permanent. So Stamp 0 is actually an Irish residency permission for people of independent means who want to live in Ireland without working. The income requirement is approximately €50,000 per year per person, plus access to a lump sum for emergencies. The government typically benchmarks at around the average price of a home in Ireland. But on Stamp 0, the huge disadvantage is that you can't work, you can't run a business, you can't access public funds, including healthcare, so you need private medical insurance for the entire duration. On paper, Stamp 0 does still look like a good route for an American retiree, for example, who has a pension or investment income and wants to live in Ireland. And the financial bar is reasonable, the conditions are clear, and the lifestyle could be a great fit for somebody who wants a quieter European retirement. But There is this one serious problem with Stamp Zero that a lot of people don't hear about. The official policy is that Stamp Zero is not reckonable for naturalization. So that basically means that you can live in Ireland on Stamp Zero for 10 years, renew the permission every year, build your life there, pay your health insurance, never become a burden on the state. But at the end of that 10 years, you'd still have 0 days of reckonable residency towards Irish citizenship. It's as if the clock never started because Stamp Zero does not have the ability to start the clock. There are a few exceptions, and I want to be precise about this. According to Berkeley Solicitors, a Dublin-based immigration firm, there have been several successful naturalization applications from clients on Stamp Zero, where they made specific legal submissions to the Minister for Justice. Now, in Ireland, the Minister for Justice has absolute discretion in citizenship decisions, and they can grant an exception. But these are exceptional cases that require legal representation and not something that's common or typical. The default policy applied to the overwhelming majority of Stamp Zero applicants is that the time doesn't count towards citizenship. But you might find that, expat forums and some YouTube videos skip over this fact, and they present Stamp Zero as a retirement visa for Ireland. And the trap goes even deeper than that. Stamp Zero doesn't even lead to Stamp 5, which is Ireland's version of permanent residency, after 8 years of qualifying time. So if you're a retiree on Stamp Zero, you're not just blocked from citizenship, but you're blocked from any permanent status in Ireland at all. For the rest of your life in Ireland, you just keep renewing your status again and again in a cycle. So if your end goal is either citizenship or permanent residency in Ireland, definitely avoid Stamp Zero. Instead, you need to have a route that puts you on a reckonable stamp from the very beginning, which means critical skills, STEP, a family-based route, or some other qualifying path. So Stamp Zero is the biggest trap, but there are a couple of smaller traps that apply to all the routes we've talked about so far, and it's important to know about them so you can make a fully qualified decision about Ireland. Next up, I want to talk about a few things that apply to all the options that we've talked about so far. There's one in particular that adds a full extra year to your realistic citizenship timeline, and I'll come to that towards the end of this section. So first off, the rule that trips up more first-time applicants than any other. This is that the clock starts when your reckonable stamp begins, not when you first arrive in Ireland. If you spend 6 months on a tourist visa interviewing for jobs and figuring out your move, those 6 months don't count at all. And if you start on Stamp 2 as a student, for example, those student years don't count either. So the day your Stamp 1 or Stamp 4 is issued and registered is the day that your clock starts. So if you're calculating your timeline, make sure to count from that day and not from your arrival. Secondly, is the 1-year continuous residency rule. Now, this is quite unique to Ireland. To apply for citizenship, you need to have 365 days of continuous reckonable residence immediately before the date you apply. Now, you can be outside Ireland for up to 70 days in that year, plus an additional 30 days in exceptional circumstances. But if you go over that, you risk the clock resetting and you have to do another full year living in Ireland before you can apply. Third is dual citizenship. Now, Ireland does allow you to keep your existing citizenship without any condition, and the majority of other countries are fine with this too, such as the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and the vast majority of EU countries. But some countries, including India and China, will automatically revoke your citizenship when you naturalize as Irish. So if you're from one of these countries that does not allow dual citizenship, you do need to know that becoming Irish probably means giving up your original passport. So always check your home country's specific rules before you apply. And the fourth is US worldwide taxation. Now, if you're a US citizen, becoming Irish does not sever your US tax obligations. The US has citizenship-based taxation, and it's going to tax you on your worldwide income no matter where you live. And having an Irish passport doesn't change that. FATCA, FBAR, and worldwide income reporting all continue, and the only way to fully get out of US taxation is to actually renounce your US citizenship, which is a separate process with its own consequences, and it's quite a big deal. And none of this is really unique to Ireland, but a lot of Americans may assume, but some Americans might assume that having the second passport would solve the tax problem, but it absolutely does not. And one final thing is that the 5-year reckonable residence requirement is just the eligibility threshold. After you apply, processing can typically take around 12 months. So a realistic timeline from arrival in Ireland to holding an Irish passport in your hand could be a minimum of 6 years rather than the 5 years that you actually have as a minimum of residency. So plan around that accordingly. So that's every route, every catch, and every reason to choose carefully. Let's now pull it all together into one framework that you can use right now to guide your decision. So if you're interested in Ireland and you're trying to figure out which route fits best for your situation, here's a quick summary to help guide you. If you're a skilled professional with a sponsoring employer in mind, then you should aim for the critical skills permit. If you've got a real business idea and you have serious domain expertise behind it, and you can muster up a management team and €50,000, then you should look at the STEP program. If you hold UK citizenship, even if you're a dual citizen with the UK and another country, you can just move to Ireland and let the common travel area handle everything else. And if you're a retiree or somebody on another form of passive income, it's probably best to think carefully about Stamp Zero because it doesn't lead anywhere permanent. So if you want citizenship in the end, this is not the right choice for you. And there's one important caveat here. If you don't fit any of these routes, for example, if you're retired, a freelancer, or a remote worker without an Irish employer, then Ireland might not actually be the best option for you. Places like Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands have more residency pathways for the self-employed and passive income earners, as well as Cyprus, Greece, Portugal, Italy, and France, which all have viable options for retirees and those earning passive income. So, although Ireland's naturalisation rules are very favourable, the routes to actually get into the country in the first place can be narrower than some of the EU alternatives. And I'll look at more of those in a future video. If you found this video useful and want more content like this on immigration and second citizenship across Europe, please click like on this video and feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching Digital Emigre, and I'll see you in the next one.